Hey guys, so we just got through an introduction to the structure of the sentence in English. We said that every single sentence is going to be comprised of a subject and a predicate. And typically in English, that's the order in which you find them. So in other words, if we were looking at another language, it might be the case that the subject will occur after the predicate. We could have the opposite order. But because we're looking at examples from English, we want to see what are the patterns that reveal themselves in this particular language. So we said that a sentence in English is always comprised of a subject and a predicate. You need those two things in order to have a sentence in English. And if you do have those two things, you will always have a sentence. And interestingly, the subject of the sentence, we said, is basically what the topic of the sentence is. What is the sentence about? Who is it giving you information about? Or what is it giving you information about? On the other hand, the predicate is saying something about the topic of the sentence, about the subject of the sentence. So for example, when you say, Fred hit the wall, and you think to yourself, okay, who are we describing in this sentence? We're describing Fred. Fred is the subject of the sentence. And then we look at hit the wall. Well, you know that hit is the main verb here. So that's going to begin the predicate part of our sentence. Hit the wall is the predicate that tells you information about the subject, Fred. So that division into the subject and predicate is going to hold true for every single sentence in English. And we mentioned that that is typically the order in which we have English sentences. If you start moving things around and you try to emphasize something, then you can have a different order. But the typical, general, usual word order that we find is the subject and then the predicate. Okay, so knowing that every sentence is going to be divided up into a subject and predicate, we can isolate the verb phrase of the sentence. The verb phrase of the sentence is exactly the same as the predicate. So we could, for example, think about an example like Mary saw the movie. And here, when we have this example, Mary saw the movie. First of all, who is being described here? Mary. Mary is the subject of the sentence. And then the rest of the sentence, saw the movie, that's telling you some information about Mary, right? Namely, she engaged in watching a movie. So Mary is our subject, saw the movie is our predicate. And we know that our predicate is always going to be made up of a verb phrase. What that tells us is that every single predicate, every single verb phrase will have one main verb. And so when you think about that as a unit, saw the movie, you know that saw is the predicate. It's the thing that describes the action. And when you think about the movie, what is the movie doing with respect to the scene? The movie is the thing that is seen. So the person doing the action is Mary, and the movie is the thing that gets the action of seeing. That will always be the direct object. And this type of verb phrase is what we call monotransitive. Monotransitive is probably the most common type of verb phrase that you have in English. If you start looking at examples from novels or books or other texts, you're going to see a lot of examples of subject, verb, direct object. You can probably come up with many examples right now of sentences that have that structure. So it's usually the one that we talk about first because it's so common. It will always be comprised of a verb and a direct object. And direct object just means it receives the action of the verb. Okay? So, for example, if you have a sentence like, Phyllis shot the burglar. Okay, so Phyllis shot the burglar. First question is, who is this sentence about? What is the subject of the sentence? And we would know that it is Phyllis, right? We're saying something about Phyllis. Well, what are we saying about her? We're saying that she shot the burglar. So that is the predicate of the sentence, shot the burglar. Okay, so we know that shot the burglar is the predicate. We know we're going to have a main verb in there, and you know that the verb shot is a main verb because it describes the action of the sentence and because it's occurring in the past tense form. So if you say, Mary shot the burglar yesterday, that would sound like a normal sentence, but if you said, Mary shot the burglar tomorrow, then that sounds like kind of a weird sentence because you're talking about an event that occurred before and you're saying that it's going to occur tomorrow. So you have this clash there between, okay, it's something in the past, but now it's happening in the future, right? So since we know that only verbs can take the tense forms, the past tense, the future tense, the present tense, only a verb is going to be showing up in one of those forms. So you would know, okay, shot is showing up in the past tense, it's the main verb. The burglar, what is the burglar doing in this sentence? What is the function of the burglar? The burglar is the guy who gets shot, right? So the burglar is the recipient of the action of shooting. And so for that reason, we say that the burglar is the direct object. So if you always think about it as the direct object receives the action of the verb, that will always tell you what the direct object is in the sentence. Nothing else can ever be receiving the action of the verb, only a direct object. Okay, so that, as we mentioned, is a very, very common type of verb phrase in English. I'm going to give you examples of many, many more of these so that, as I was mentioning last time, you go through examples, and as you go through examples and you go through examples and you go through examples, you just start seeing the patterns emerge, and then it becomes a little bit more natural. You're like, oh yeah, okay, that's monotransitive, I see the direct object, and then you look at another sentence and you're like, okay, there's an indirect object there, therefore it's going to be ditransitive, and you just become familiar with this terminology because you're applying it, because you're thinking about, okay, how am I going to analyze this sentence? What am I going to say about the different parts of this sentence? So keep it in mind that you want to give yourself time to learn this terminology. It's not like you can watch the video or read the chapter and, boom, you've got it. It could be the case that you've studied some sort of linguistic analysis before. Sometimes if you study a language other than your own language, you start thinking about these things like, what is the subject of the sentence, or where is the subject of the sentence? And that is my phone ringing, so I will take that opportunity to say goodbye to you for a minute.